All right, guys. I am recording this so I can stick it up for people who aren't here later, which is cool. There's no, like I said in the ping, there's no groundbreaking changes or anything like that here. I just wanted to kind of give an update on where we are on a couple of things. So I'm going to get started. The first topic I want to discuss is the war. So a couple of weeks ago, Pan Am Accord and the rest of PanFam joined Fraternity's war against B2 in response to Fire moving up into Pureblind as well. As a result, Imperium got involved because we didn't want to see B2 evicted and more space handed over to Fraternity. Winterco and PanFam, etc., already have the most space in the game. Most of it is kept for like rental, whether it's internal or external. And obviously that's not ideal. So there's not a whole lot we can do to take their space. I'm not really interested in doing that, but we do want to try and prevent them from taking more space. So here we are. Obviously, the timers that we've dealt with so far have all been Chinese time zone. So that ranges from 9 in the morning Eve time until about 2. Obviously, that's quite difficult for us to deal with primarily as an EU time zone alliance, but so far our numbers and our forms and everything have been pretty amazing. I guess a lot of people are working from home or are on holidays or are taking time or whatever. But overall, I have zero complaints about like our ability to form even in our off time zones. So good job on that. One thing I do want to clarify, because I've seen it's starting to be pushed as a talking point among hostile alliances and on Reddit from basically uneducated people or people who just don't know better. The Alliance will never ask anybody to cancel real life appointments. We will never ask you to take a day off work. It's a game, and while it's great to see everybody show up and the willingness of people to show up for these things, it's never more important than real life. So don't cancel doctor's appointments or interviews, or if you've got real life stuff to do, you've got real life stuff to do. That's cool. We will manage. If you can be around for it, amazing. If there's a great timer coming up, we're not asking people to take time off work or anything like that, right? Don't call in sick. Don't take annual leave. None of that. There's no need. Okay, again, because it's a game. But if you do that, like if you take a day's annual leave from your job, or if you call in sick, that's your own choice. Like you will never be asked to do that from an alliance point of view. So I just wanted to make that very clear today. So like I said, primarily it's in Chinese time zone, as I'm sure basically everybody here is aware. One of the reasons that I opted to do this meeting in kind of early EU morning, or kind of Chinese prime, I guess, is because of the fact that, well, number one, it's a Saturday, so a lot of us can be here. But number two, it's just the time zone where things are happening in, so it seemed a bit more fitting. I also try and move these around the different time zones. I know US time zone has it a bit rough, but kind of AU and EU I can do on weekends at least. Okay, so so far the war has been okay. I know it's not been the most exciting across time zones. AU is getting a lot of fights. The timers, the keep stars that we're going for, obviously are all timed to AU, so it's very early morning. And a lot of these aren't happening on weekends. So it's kind of whoever's around during the weekday. As an EU alliance, like we are an EU alliance, I know we have a lot of people in other time zones as well, but primarily we are an EU-based alliance. It's not the easiest, but we're still kind of putting up a good show and representing ourselves fairly well. Hostiles, Fraternity, for example, are in their prime time. So obviously, because they're defensive timers for Fraternity, they're going to time them to when best suits them. And we've seen decent forms then as well from Pandemic Horde and other groups that are coming to help them. So it's not an easy war by any stretch. There's lots of narratives, lots of figures, lots of bullshit flying around on Reddit and on other Discords and stuff like that. But the reality is that we're fighting into a time zone that we're not how do I say this? It's not our main time zone, so we're fighting an uphill battle, basically. So far, 3 of the 4 keep stars in Pureblind are dead. The last remaining keep star is X47, which we are keeping permanently refed. Every time we ref the keep star and the 4 desires in system, hostiles are forced to move all the shiny clones and shit 2 or 3 jumps back to another keep star until the keep star repairs, and then we ref it again. So basically, we're trying to keep the pressure up. We're trying to create as many opportunities as we can during the week for stuff to happen. Because goons have the Leshak fleet, it spools up a lot of damage very quickly. It means that these ops, basically to ref 2 keep stars and 4 desires, usually don't take more than an hour, and we can do it in EU Prime. Now, obviously, keep star refs and stuff are not the only thing we want to be doing, but for now, it's keeping the pressure up, and that's what we want to do. There will be more move ops from Fountain heading north, and actually something I will touch on later. But if any of you haven't seen it, CCP have announced I think it's a 3-day Omega for 1 Plex deal, which I personally think it's trying to drive up end of quarter numbers or stop the flow of unsubs over the blockchain game. But regardless, now is a good time to plex any accounts and stuff that you want to get moved, or maybe you need to do stuff on. So we will have a move up tomorrow up from Fountain into Declan for anyone who needs to move more stuff. But it's a good opportunity to maybe move stuff like Supers and Titans that you don't necessarily have resubbed at the minute, but that you want to move into the war theater. At the start of the war, we kind of went north with our SIG Astartes, Adeptus Astartes. And the intention was that we would use Astartes kind of as the main hammer, I suppose, or group that we would use to do things in the north, and then that the alliance would be called in whenever there was big timers. The reasoning behind this, again, is I've just tried to stress this on previous meetings. It's not to try and exclude people, but it's more to try and only do alliance fleets with maybe people who are interested in doing alliance fleets. So if you want to sit at home and rat in an Ishtar or gobble up R64s in your Hulks or whatever, then that's 100% okay. And the reason that we have Astartes is to try and allow more than one play style in the alliance to go and be active at the same time. But when alliance fleets do go up, and they have been going up quite recently a lot because of the level of activity in the north, we do expect everybody to join in on them. This is an active war. While it wasn't ourselves who declared it, we are part of the Imperium, and we do have a responsibility, especially as the second largest alliance in the Imperium, to participate in this and to give it our all. And so far we have. So I'm pretty happy with that. Astartes is going to start seeing more activity again. as the first 3 keep stars are dead, it relieves a certain amount of pressure and focuses the fighting in a single area. So massive numbers aren't needed for everything going forward. So we'll see an uptick in Astartes fleets and a downtick in Alliance fleets. Now, there may still be Alliance fleets at home and in the north, but I expect that, or at least we've instructed FCs to start using Astartes for non-critical ops and then escalate to the Alliance when needed. So if you are not in Astartes and you are interested in these fleets, I would recommend putting an application into Astartes, and then once the interview's been done, you can get accepted in. The interview for Astartes, for anyone who's not sure, is just a handful of questions on Mumble with a recruiter, and then you get in. It's just to double check basically that everybody has a working microphone, etc. We will be doing more interviews on those. We got about 500 people processed in the space of 2 weeks. So I just want to give a big thank you to the guys who were looking after that. And then as well as that, just everyone's patience with the process. I know it was a bit annoying for us and for you, but having a working microphone is an Alliance requirement. That is a basic community requirement, is having a working microphone. I'm not sure if people are aware of that or not. If you're not, then you need to grab your CEO by the knees and slap him on the ears. And then make sure that everybody is aware that a working microphone is a requirement for the Alliance. And that's the reason for the interview. So anyone joining Astartes must have a working microphone. But yeah, look, that pretty much sums it up. We've got the first 3 keep stars. We're now kind of, there's a single front, I suppose, on this war, which is the X-47 constellation. It somewhat mimics the Delve situation we were in with 1DQ a few years ago. Not exactly, but similar. And obviously hostiles see this as their 1DQ defense or constellation defense. So it's going to be interesting to see how we crack it. But yeah, anyway. So sorry, what am I reading here? So just keep up the good work, keep joining the fleets, and most importantly, please make sure you have all your doctrines and stuff ready to go. All right, so as far as the war, that's pretty much all I have to say on it. What I want to just quickly address at the moment, or the next topic I want to move on to, is the Alliance itself. Both myself and the rest of the Alliance leadership team try to keep communication up as much as possible. But obviously, when things like a war kick off or when there's big changes in the game, it can be a bit of a challenge to keep that communication up. And I just wanted to basically discuss or kind of show people where we're headed as a group, what our plans are, and maybe just some details that people might not be aware of to highlight, I guess, the importance of what we do as a group. On the big stage, but also in our little day-to-day interactions that we have as an Alliance. So first, I just want to mention, and this catches me every time. Every time we deploy somewhere else, I fall in love with Fountain even more. It's a good region, okay, by itself, but what makes it special is the fact that we have a dedicated team of people who relentlessly fuel online and just maintain all of our infrastructure, jump bridges, Athenors, whatever is in Fountain with an Init ticker, it is managed and fueled by a small group of people. And then when we're passing through like crazy expensive blue jump bridges or neutral jump bridges that run out of fuel after we've gotten access to them and shit like that, it just makes me fall in love with Fountain even more. So I really, and I've said this on a few fleets, but I just want to give a big shout out to the infrastructure and fuel team for keeping Fountain running the way they do, because I don't know of another region in the game like it. So good job to all of you, and thank you for the work you put in. As well as that, we have so basically this is the Alliance Department section. I just want to give a quick shout out as well to the SRP team. We took on a couple of new members there last year who settled in very well, and I think most people would agree that SRP is a very quick turnaround from when you lose your ship to getting a payout. So again, thanks for the work that's put in there, guys. We also have the Diplo team, the rental team, the procurement team, the FC core team, and then we have our IT, I suppose, team called Aaron, who makes sure that the lights are kept on. There's going to be probably openings across all of these teams to try and increase the amount of people in them, just so that we can have things running as smoothly as possible. In terms of the Diplo team, I know there have been some changes recently. Just to explain, we had about 600 entries on our ACL list. That's 600 individuals that have to be maintained, again, like as individuals. And it's just too much work. So recently, the Diplo team over the last few months have been trying to basically find a way to reduce the admin time of dealing with kind of entries on our ACL and on our standings and stuff like that. So there's been a couple of changes. Some of you might have been negatively affected. If you have, I'm sorry. But there's just we needed to make the standings and ACL system a bit more manageable. So it's still a work in progress, but we're making good progress on it. So just a shout out to the Diplo team for looking after that. Obviously, the moons that we have in Fountain are nationalized. What that means is the Alliance takes all of the valuable moons, I suppose, R64s, decent R60, R32s, and we slap Alliance structures on them. They're maintained by the fueling and infrastructure team, and the rest are available to be rented out basically by people who might want their own personal moons. They are low value moons, but you know, people might want the low value stuff as well, and the rental team looks after all of that. So I know they're fairly busy the last few days or weeks, so again, thank you to them. A lot of the Doctrines that we're flying on day to day, a lot of the Fortizars, the Tataras, the Keepstars that we drop randomly are sourced and made by the procurement team, headed up by Calforce. He goes to sleep because he's AU time zone, and then he wakes up with a list of, hey, we need 14 Fortizars or 2 Keepstars or 64 jammers or some shit, and he manages to get it done. So and that's just structures, never mind ships and everything else. So again, there's a lot of work been put in there. And then we have our IT. So Aaron Cable, if you're not familiar with him, looks after our Alliance Alt along with Ariel. I know Ariel helps develop it and looks after wiki and everything for us as well. Aaron is, I guess, the main IT person. They recently put a lot of work into upgrading the Mumble server and making constant improvements to Alliance Alt, which allows us to do some pretty cool things. All right, so look, those are the Alliance departments. I really hope I haven't missed anyone there, but there's a lot of people working behind the scenes. So whenever we have an opportunity like this, I like to mention them because they do it of their own free will. They don't get paid for it. It's people volunteering, and you know, as far as things go, we run a pretty good area down in Fountain and the surrounding areas. So thank you to everybody for the work that's been put in for the you know, to keep that running. Just on the IT side of things, we had our CTA last month. We got 700 people together on Mumble, and Mumble did not work. Recently, or kind of after that, Aaron upgraded our IT infrastructure. It increased the price significantly from, I think it was $6 a month up to about $50 a month just for Mumble, not including auth and everything else. And as a result, we opened up an Alliance Patreon page asking anyone who could afford to and would be willing to just throw a few dollars or euros or whatever your currency is towards the funding of those services. So there was a massive response. There's a slight issue with the Patreon page at the minute where they think it's a scam. So I'm dealing with Patreon IT at the moment to get that resolved. It should be sorted in the next day or so, I'm hoping. They've basically looked for proof that we are actually an online community. So I've got to write a bunch of emails saying who we are and what we do and proof and stuff like that. So it should be resolved fairly shortly. And then we will be able to unlock the funds and get the payments sorted for the Alliance services. So anyway, that's just a small update on that. I had to laugh a little bit when I got the email, but these things happen. And again, just a big thank you to everyone who contributed towards that. We really appreciate it, and it allows us to keep the lights on with everything from Alliance auth to Mumble and everything in between. Okay, so that's kind of the Alliance departments. Alliance finances. This is always a fun one because I like to give people an idea of what's happening, but I also don't want to give away too much because it can be used against you very quickly by other alliances. So we have an alliance goal. One of our alliance goals this year is to buy back all our war bonds by the 1st of May. So there's a month left, just over a month left. And then we will be buying the remaining trillion-isk of war bonds back from people who hold them. And then that will be hopefully an end to at least this iteration of the war bond campaign. Just a very brief history, war bonds basically were introduced back during the big war and they allowed us to keep the alliance running. We raised 2.5 trillion ISK basically by members buying a war bond, which was they would give us 1 billion ISK and then we would give them a share in a corporation saying that we will pay you back as soon as we can. So raising 2.5 trillion ISK was pretty impressive. It showed a lot of trust in the alliance, or just a lot of very rich people, one or the other. But so far we've spent the last kind of 2 years working away on that debt, and now by May we're going to get rid of the last trillion ISK basically. So I have been looking forward to this day for a while. It is, I know it's only a game, but there is a lot of stress that goes into Alliance finances and stuff that I think a lot of people maybe don't realize. So I'm looking forward to getting rid of them. As well as that, obviously we have a lot of different income streams. We have a lot of different expenditure streams. I'm not going to go into every single one of them. Again, a lot of this is OPSEC, and to be honest, I don't think any other alliances share any of this information with members. But I think it's important that when we're taxing people, or when you take a jump bridge and there's a charge, or when you have to pay 30% mining tax on R64s or 35% or whatever it is, I think it's important that there's a certain level of communication about where that ISK is going and how it's been generated and how it's been spent. I actually had a conversation with someone the other day who asked me why I was ratting, and I said, oh, well, I plexed all my accounts last year. I'm doing a bit of ratting on the site to make some ISK, and their response was they just assumed that alliance leaders just skimmed off the top and paid for accounts and stuff that way. That doesn't happen, and I think that this kind of communication is important to give people a bit of confidence in what we do as a group and why we do things as a group. So I went back and I pulled the figures for the first kind of quarter, I guess, in the alliance. I've hand-picked some figures. These are not all of the figures. I posted them in CEO last night, and people were a bit like, what the fuck? We're totally spending way more than we have. That's not the case. I've just picked out a few figures to give people an idea. But for the first time kind of in a while, as we've been reducing the war bond debt, etc., we are actually turning a profit again. SRP continues to be and always will be the biggest expense of the alliance. The biggest income we have are the taxes, so ratting and mining in Fountain, or kind of any ratting, I suppose, in the game, and mining in Fountain are providing the majority of our income. But we do some other income streams as well. So since January 1st this year, the market in B170 has generated 410 billion ISK. Reprocessing has generated 100 billion ISK. The jump gates, so every time somebody takes a jump gate in Fountain, we've generated 47 billion ISK just in jumperage fees. And then planetary interaction, so PI, has also generated about 47 billion ISK since the start of the year. Okay, so that gives you kind of an idea of why we have market taxes, why we have PI taxes, why we have jumperage taxes, stuff like that. Now, I would like to point out that after our last campaign and moving through Blue Space and Delve and everywhere else where the jumperage prices were fucking ridiculous, we made a point of coming home to Fountain and reducing ours down. So I'm pretty sure we have the lowest in the Imperium at the minute by a long way. I think goons are about 350 ISK per LO. We're down to about 250 per LO. So we want to make travel around as around the region as cheap as possible, so that people can make use of the space, I suppose. And but it does show that we are still able to make some money off it, which then gets turned around and dumped straight back into jumperages again. So those are the incomes. I picked out 3 major expenditures then as well. So one that might be interesting for people is Solve. So Fountain costs us, it's costed us 170 billion ISK in iHub fees alone. That's 170 billion ISK in iHub fees alone since January. Okay. And so every time somebody bitches about jump bridges or bitches about Solve being too OP or any of that shit, we pay for it. The next biggest kind of expenditure, or the most consistently biggest expenditure we have, is SRP. So in the past 3 months, we've paid out about 500 billion ISK in SRP. Actually, over 500 billion ISK. It was taking too long to get an exact figure, so I settled on 500 billion ISK. And then the last one is projects and buybacks. So every time CalForce puts up buybacks for fuel or for PI or for various things, or if we launch a buyback for blueprints like we did with Navy Megas, and now we're doing with TFIs and HFIs and FNIs and stuff. Anything like that was included in this figure. So in the last 3 months, we've spent about 600 billion ISK on buybacks and other projects. So that's 600 billion ISK in taxes and everything else going straight back into line members' wallets. The reason that we push the stuff like faction warfare and different things like that is because we have to buy this stuff anyway. I would much prefer this ISK goes back into your wallets and my wallet than into some random in Jitta. Okay, so anytime there's a big push like that, that's kind of the reason why we're trying to open up basically, I guess, an artificial economy, or ways that we can pour ISK out of the Alliance wallet back into individual wallets. Right, so like I said, I'm not going to give a full overview of our exact income or anything like that, but hopefully people get an idea of kind of the figures that we're dealing in, both in terms of income and expenditure, and maybe it opens a bit of a curtain for people. who maybe haven't heard or seen, or maybe aren't familiar with running a large group. Those them's be the costs, kind of. All right. Something else I wanted to discuss was alliance direction. So there's a couple of different angles that this comes from, and they all kind of merge somewhere in the middle, but they're also not linked. I'm not explaining this great, but basically there's a couple of different talking points, and I'm just going to get into it. So in terms of an alliance, if you don't know the history of Initiative, we were a independent group. We didn't have any allies, or we had very few allies years ago. We're talking about 10, 12 years ago. The game was full of alliances, not coalitions. There were coalitions, but it was alliances by the majority, and then people would form coalitions when they needed to. The dominant forces back then were groups like PL, NC Dot, DRF, who were drone Russians. And back at that time, there was no limit to how far you could project. So, and this is not an exaggeration. If PL got word, I'm using PL because they were the big bad wolf back then. If PL got word that you had supers on grid tackle, or that you had dreads in siege somewhere, they could log in Sino chains all the way from Tino, or wherever they lived at the time, let's say Vale of the Silent, and light a full Sino chain to the south, and be in Immensity in about 5 minutes. You used to be able to jump a cap fit Titan, like an avatar, and it would be fully capped up and ready to jump again in about 17 seconds. So you could literally cross the map in 5 minutes. There was no limit to it, and it did happen back then. Then CCP introduced fatigue, and things kind of changed. But what we found back then was that we were a little bit burned out. We were constantly getting dropped on. We weren't a big alliance. We were sizable, but we weren't massive. We were very good at subcaps, but we didn't have a capital backbone. And we felt that we needed to join a coalition to basically adapt to changing circumstances in EVE Online. And that's what we did. We joined Imperium. And since then, obviously, Goons and Co, the coalition has changed a little bit since our days of joining, but we found some very good allies in Goonswarm and Co. But one thing that has become apparent over the last 2 years, and I've said this kind of more internally than publicly, is that we probably have become a bit too dependent on coalitions and other groups in the game helping us. And kind of with that in mind, we set out a couple of goals the end of last year for 2023 going forward. So the first thing was that we wanted to, we already have a pretty good capital fleet, but it could be better. So we introduced the requirement for the majority of people in the Alliance to have a capital by the end of, starting in January 2023. Once we reach that goal, we'll extend it further into maybe super capitals and Titans if they're buildable at that point. Not everybody, but like that, we're all working towards them if we can. Or, if there's a different power projection or force multiplier or whatever, we'll work towards that. But basically, the point I'm trying to make is that we need to be able to stand on our own 2 feet. And a big part of that is having a capital backbone. I know a lot of people don't like capital gameplay, and that's fine. But if you want to do anything in EVE Online, you have to be able to either scare people away, or when it comes down to it, win fights. And capitals are a big part of that. We are tracking kind of like the overall alliance just to see how that growth is going, and so far it seems to be pretty good. So I just wanted to thank everybody for putting the effort into getting capitals or training into them. I know a lot of people may not have them yet, but there are definitely people training towards them. So it is appreciated, and just keep up the good work in that regard. The other kind of, I suppose, thing about the coalition is that we have this free for all space policy that was introduced at the end of the last war, whereby kind of anybody in the Imperium could rat anywhere in Imperium space. And I'd done a poll about a month and a half ago, maybe 2 months ago, that turned into a meme poll. The first hour, I think, was quite accurate, where more people, very slightly, let's say like 51% of people disliked it, and then 49% of people liked it. But then after that, it turned into a challenge of people trying to keep the scores exactly the same. Anyway, regardless, just in terms of space, personally, I would prefer to see everybody sticking in Fountain. Now, if you want to go to Delve and mine helium because we don't have that in Fountain, cool, that's fine. There are certain circumstances where you just have to go outside of the region to do things. But what I would prefer, at least the Alliance would prefer, to see people in Fountain than in other areas of space. Now, there's no change to the rules. All right, this is, nobody's going to come knock you on your door or any of that shit. I just want to put it out there that I would prefer to see initiative members in initiative space using initiative infrastructure. It would, to a certain extent, remove another step of reliance kind of on coalition and allies. Only a very small step, but it's just something I want to mention as well. Well, okay, Iridia and Outer Ring are included. Sorry, I'm keeping an eye on iGeneral as well. But yeah, hopefully people understand what I mean. There are also some issues with allies that we're having in Fountain, bots and other things. Regardless of whatever Reddit says, I strongly encourage you to report anybody who looks like they're botting. CCP seem to be fairly quick at coming back and saying thank you. If you report somebody for botting, they won't tell you what's happened to that person, but they will acknowledge it. So if you see somebody botting, make sure you report it, please. You can do that by clicking into their character information and report botting activity or something, I think it's called. It's a very quick and simple process, and it's important that whether they're blue or they're hostile, that we keep the game as clean as possible, right? If somebody has like completely 100% watertight proof that somebody is botting, feel free to reach out to the Diplo team. Now, I mean watertight, right? Like, don't fuck around with Diplos. But in a case where botting is 100% without a doubt happening, the Diplos can be notified, and as happened recently, we will drop vendettas and titans and shit on these blues and kill them. It's bad enough botting, but botting in Fountain is a big fucking no-no. So yeah. Okay, that's kind of just on kind of initiative and our kind of, I suppose, relationship in the coalition. No major changes on that front. It's just I would like to make sure that we are becoming as independent as we can be. I'll put it that way. In more exciting news, because I know people love new doctrines, we've been looking at different doctrines over the last few weeks. We considered bringing Ishtars back. There's a couple of use cases that we just don't have covered at the moment. So we'll be kind of bringing out 3 new doctrines and I'll go into a little bit of detail on each of them. So the first one is a ghost doctrine. So if you fly your ghost character, thank you, number one. If you don't fly your ghost character, please start, because ghosts are a very important aspect of what we do, or sorry, how we defend ourselves in Fountain. It gives people a chance to run relatively cheap configs against any incursions into our space, like with reserve banks, etc. Okay, and it's a character that's always meant to be in B170. It doesn't leave B170 except in a ghost fleet. It shouldn't be mining. It shouldn't be ratting. It should be sitting in B170 waiting for a ping, ready to go. Okay. If you want to do ratting and mining on alts, use a different alt. You do not need to omega them, right? They can be left as an alpha. I know some people like myself do omega them just to keep things handier, but it's completely up to yourself, and there is no expectation that you do omega them, okay? But with the recent release of the Navy ships, it means that we can kind of upscale our ghost doctrines without massive cost increases. So for anyone who has T2 medium railguns, so basically fully skilled Ferox pilots, we'll be asking people to get a Ferox Navy issue. And we're going to roll out Ferox Navy issues as the primary doctrine for home defense. We're doing buybacks on Ferox Navy issue blueprints. So if you're in the Caldari faction warfare and want to make some guaranteed money, we're buying Ferox Navy BPCs. You don't need to go to Jeddah and buy Ferox Navies right now. We will build them and we'll stick them up as cheaply as possible. And then when we have enough, we'll announce it as an active doctrine. But for now, we're still in the procurement and building stage. Okay, but that is coming. The second one we're going to do is a whole. Sorry, excuse me. 1 sec. I can tell I'm talking too much. I'll try to wrap it up soon. Sorry, guys. The Hurricane Navy issue, or Hurricane Fleet issue, or whatever the fuck it's called. We're going to be rolling out Navy Hurricanes in Fountain as a main home defense doctrine. We've had to move other doctrines out of Fountain to deal with certain scenarios in the north, and that's left us with Feroxes and Eagles as our home defense doctrines, which are Feroxes are good, Eagles not so good. So we're going to be rolling out Hurricane fleet issues as a doctrine in Fountain. Again, we're still in the procurement and building stage of those, but anyone who's running Minmatar faction warfare and again wants to make some ISK, we're buying Hurricane fleet issue BPCs. And then the last doctrine is going to be a mainline doctrine. It's tying into the Voidhawk fleet. It's going to be Tempest fleet issues. APOCs are great at killing hacks. They're decent at killing battleships, but they are definitely outperformed in battleship versus battleship fleets by TFIs, specifically when it comes to tie-dye. Historically, RT doctrines have always performed the best in tie-dye, and we are kind of in a lot of tie-dye fights at the moment. But also, if Fountain was ever to be invaded, it would also be tie-dye fights at that point. So, with the changes to faction warfare and everything else, now is as good a time as any to introduce TFIs back into our kind of active doctrines. We don't have fits or anything for them yet. Again, these are also in the procurement and building stage, but once we have enough of them, they will be available for people to buy, again, as cheaply as possible. The way they're going to work, we're not getting rid of NAPOCs, okay? Like I said, they're still a very good ship. They're just outperformed in this one area, but it is an area that's important and it's a hole we need to fill. So that's what we're going to do with the TFIs. So basically, if you are familiar with our bombers, our bombing bombers, daisy cutters, we've got a daisy cutter type A and a daisy cutter type B. One is electron bombs, one is shrapnel bombs, okay? We're going to essentially be doing the same thing with Void Hawks. We'll have a Void Hawk type A, which is APOCs and Navy Megas. And then we'll have a Void Hawk type B, which is going to be TFIs. But essentially, all that will happen is the Logi will remain the same, the command ships will remain the same, the Balgorns, the Vindis, all that stuff will remain the same. The only difference is instead of NAPOCs and Navy Megas, we'll be flying TFIs. So basically, we'll be removing the battleships from one and then inserting another battleship for one fleet, and then maybe the next fleet will be back to NAPOCs and Navy Megas. So that's basically the three new doctrines. So Ferox Navy issues for Ghosts, Hurricane Navy issues for home defense and on mains, and Tempest Fleet issues as an alternative Void Hawk doctrine. Why do we have so many fucking doctrines? Because I'm a firm believer in having doctrines ready for a situation. If we think that situation is not viable anymore or is unlikely to happen, what we will do is mothball a doctrine, try and do buybacks. But other than that, kind of this is, you either love it or you hate it. I personally like having a lot of doctrines. Some people hate it because it can be a bit expensive, but that's the alliance you're in. So yeah, as soon as those doctrines are posted and ready to go, there'll be a big announcement about it on the in the Alliance announcements channel. Right, in terms of Alliance, guys, that's pretty much it. Overall, we're doing well. Our finances are doing okay. We don't rent. Actually, that's just one point on finances. Like, we don't rent space out, okay? And renting space is the way to make money in EVE Online as an alliance. So we are unfortunately intentionally handicapping ourselves in that regard, but it is what it is. We do everything else basically to the best of our abilities, and we manage to keep things running and keep things ticking over, and still deploy for the majority of the year. So again, like I said earlier, I just think it's important that there's a level of transparency behind why taxes are there and why they're this and why they're that, and hopefully people maybe have a bit of a better understanding on them now. If you have not yet looked at faction warfare, please look at faction warfare. If you are tired of running Havens and an Ishtar, if you have been looking to learn to PvP but don't really want to replace a 200 mil ship every day as you learn to PvP, faction warfare is an extremely cheap, as in it's done in Tech 1 frigates, so 10 to 20 mil a pop every time you die, and it's extremely lucrative in terms of ISK. So you make a lot of ISK and you get a lot of PvP skills along the way. The more people we have in these faction warfare groups, the easier it is to do things. So even if it's 20 people sitting on Mumble or joining Mumble every night and just going and doing things as a group, or helping out each other solo or whatever, it's a good way to learn different things in EVE Online. So if you haven't checked out faction warfare yet, then please check it out. If you are going to be joining faction warfare, again, just to tie back into the doctrines, we are buying Ferox Navy issue, so that's Kildari, and then Hurricane Navy issue, or Hurricane Fleet issue, sorry, and Tempest Fleet issue, which is Mimitar. So kind of Mimitar is the direction we want to go at the minute, but we'll swap it up kind of afterwards. But look, any of them is good to try out. It's a lot of fun as well. And then very briefly, just in terms of EVE Online, so kind of last year and this year, a lot of what we were trying to enforce, I guess, on the galaxy or project onto the galaxy as an alliance was opening up groups of space for small alliances to try and grow in without fear of the blob. And kind of from that came the Southern Agreement, which you've probably seen pinged or on Reddit. But it's been interesting to see the different Reddit threads popping up over the last few weeks of groups who have taken the risk, who've moved into these regions, and who are either forming their own little groups or are fighting with all the groups around them. And it's been pretty cool to see and to read those posts as they go up on the forums or on the or on Reddit. There's still a lot of empty space in those regions. There's still a lot of XI hubs, but you can see more and more people are getting interested and are moving into it. So I think that's probably one of the most successful attempts, I suppose, there has been to open up space or to help the little guy in Eve. Now, talk to a little guy and they'll tell you to go fuck yourself and you didn't do anything, but I know otherwise. It was a lot of work from my point of view, from other point of view, and then from everybody joining fleets. So I am very happy with how that has turned out so far, and just a big shout out to everyone who helped make that happen. Again, like I said earlier, there is a Plex deal, the 1 Plex for 3 days. So if you haven't availed of that yet, you probably should look at it. It is in the Plex store, or whatever it's called nowadays, NES or something. Recently, obviously, during the week, CCP announced Project Awakening, which is their new blockchain game that they're working on. There's a lot of, I think, well-deserved hate for, I guess, the idea behind it. Personally, the thoughts of having to fucking team up with and share a community with crypto bros is personally offensive to me. If I could throw them all into a bag and fuck them off a bridge, I would, but I can't. So I think CCP trying to push boundaries is a good thing, but we'll have to see what Project Awakening turns out like. But anyway, like overall, it doesn't really affect us or Eve. They've secured outside funding for it. It's not coming from Eve subscriptions, which is good, and I think they've been pretty clear in making that known, I suppose, to try and ease the pain of the blockchain announcement. But anyway, look, we'll see what happens with it, but it shouldn't affect Eve at all. And then actually the very last thing on my list was faction warfare, which we've already talked about. So that's pretty much it, guys. I've talked for the guts of an hour. I hope people found it a bit informative. I just want to thank everybody for the details. Sorry, okay, I just got a DM from somebody. You're throwing me off, Aaron. Sorry, I just want to thank everyone for the work that they're putting in. There's a lot of moving parts in a community like ours, and we're not unique in that regard. There's a lot of communities in EVE Online. There's a lot of people who put a lot of effort into the game, but we're still here playing it. So yeah, just I guess thanks for being awesome, and yeah, that's pretty much it. I hope people found it a bit informative. So I'm going to stop the recording there.